for inviting me to chat with you today.
Absolutely. I'm glad we were able to set this up. I'm guessing you have probably had a very busy spring, and this might be the first time you have sat down in an office.
Yep, yeah, it's still going actually. Different cases now, but still pretty crazy up in our department for sure.
Absolutely. So let's just start with a little background on you, Dr. B. How did you get to Haggard's? How did this whole process start?
I graduated from vet school in England, interned in England for a couple of years before moving to Australia. And then I did a couple of breeding seasons there and a breeding season in the Middle East. And then I came as an intern to Haggard's back in 2012. And then after that, I did a medicine residency in California and came back as a medicine specialist. And so I've been here almost 4 years now.
Wow. We could tell that Besorgnash is not your typical Bourbon County name. We're pretty sure England seems. Well, good. Glad to have you. I'm glad we were able to set this up. Obviously, I'm assuming you've enjoyed your time here in Central Kentucky. How does it compare to what you experienced now with your international experiences?
Oh, it's a different world. The horses, completely different caliber. The horse people here are definitely next to none. Farm managers, and then the hospital too. Here, it's just completely different to anywhere I've ever worked before, or really, I think anywhere in the world. It's very, very high standard of care, but better than you're going to get elsewhere.
Absolutely, special place. You're very unique.
Yeah.
Good. And what a history Haggard has for their so many years. It's pretty incredible. So special place to be involved for sure.
Yeah. So very lucky.
Sorry. The reason we invited Dr. B in today is we're going to discuss a little bit of colic. I know it's a word nobody wants to say. Neither one of us is in a barn, so it's okay. We've probably both touched wood under the table at this point. But we wanted to we'll keep it a little light. This is not a seminar for Central Kentucky hard boot with 35 plus years of managing a horse farm. We're going to keep it fairly general. But colic. The word colic, is it just have one meaning? There's more to it than that, right? We're not talking about a baby quit crying. We're talking about what's going on the farm when they would say the colic.
Yeah, I think when someone describes a horse as colicking, essentially that means some form of abdominal pain. Typically, we usually associate that with gastrointestinal pain, so stomach or colon or small intestine. But other parts or other organ systems like kidneys or the reproductive tract can certainly cause horses to have abdominal pain and so can display signs of colic with those conditions as well.
So you said signs of colic, and that's great. What's a sign of colic?
That is very variable, can depend on the horse and can depend on what exactly they have going on. So some horses are more stoic than others. For example, a yearling colt is probably going to show more signs of discomfort if they had the same colic as an older brood mare, for example. But signs can include looking at the flank, rolling, pawing, tremors, high heart rate, high respiratory rate, decreased manure output, parking out, can be really, really quite variable, and some more difficult to identify than others.
Absolutely. And part of being able to identify it is just knowing a horse or horses, some what is abnormal for them. Horse rolling doesn't necessarily scare you, but repeatedly and biting at the flank, some of those signs, oh wait, that's not my typical horse, right?
Exactly.
Right. Okay, so a horse owner has called you, a farm manager has called you suspecting colic, and you say, before I come out, why don't you try?
So that will depend on how bad the colic is. Typically, in this area specifically, people will usually try Banamine, or will suggest to try Banamine first, and some walking that can sometimes help. If the horse is really, really violent, particularly a brood mare, with the amount of twisted colons we see in them, sometimes you're better off just kind of bringing them in and getting them evaluated, because a lot of them do twist their colons, and that's something you want to operate as quickly as possible. But if that's not the case, then certainly trying some Banamine and some walking, is often what I'll say to try at first.
Absolutely. And so, another nice thing about Central Kentucky, the horse industry here, is we're so compact. From basically from where Haggard's or Hallway Feed sits, within about a half hour, there's something like 580 horse farms. So if you have to load your horse up, you don't have that far to drive to get to your location. So that's very nice, very comforting, should be for horse owners for sure. So they've loaded up. We've decided we can't handle this at home through some hand walking or a little Banamine didn't get rid of the discomfort. So we're coming in. They roll into Haggard's and unload. Where do they go from there?
So we'll unload the horse, and first of all, we're going to start. We'll get a bit of history. So when did this start? How bad is it? What have we given the horse? Any changes in diet, deworming, management, any of those things. And often, if the horse is uncomfortable, we'll be asking these questions while we're performing our physical exam to save time. So we're also going to be checking heart rate, respiratory rate, temperature, figuring out whether there's been normal amount of manure output. We listen for gut sounds. And then pretty soon after all of that, we're going to be popping the ultrasound probe on to try and look for any obvious causes for the colic.
So I like that you've said "we" repeatedly, because when somebody pulls up and we have an emergency situation, you're not walking out by yourself to check on this. What kind of team are we talking about?
We're talking about a really talented team. We have technicians who are going to help unload the horse and hold the horse for our exam. Then we're going to be dealing with our interns who they often will do the preliminary physical exam. And then, there may be one or two of them involved. They pull blood, they run it to the lab. And then obviously there's a senior doctor there as well. So myself or one of the other medicine doctors, or in the case of a surgeon or the surgery department, there'll be a surgeon there. And so we'll be overseeing everything, and as well as kind of performing the ultrasound and more diagnostics as needed.
Absolutely. Okay, so now you've decided we've got to open this horse up. What are we looking at? What kind of time frame from the time they arrive? If you're pretty quick to say, oh, we've got to do something, how long does it take to get them to where we can take care of the issue?
So usually that is around about, I'd say 20 minutes. Get them down to surgery, ties them. The longest part of the process is actually cleaning their abdomen. So obviously you need to clip the abdomen, and then you need to prepare it so that it's an aseptic surgical field. You don't want any bacteria present on the skin that you can then introduce into the abdomen. And so the clipping and the scrubbing is actually, what takes the longest in that situation. Then the surgeon will drape and then kind of make their incision into the abdomen, and then kind of hunt around in there to try and figure out what the problem is.
Yeah, because once you have it opened up, it doesn't mean it's just sticking right out at you. I mean, you said a twist, there could be a blockage. It could be any number of things, right?
Right, exactly. So part of the large colon, the cecum, is what usually is right there in a normal horse when you open them up. If the cecum's not right there, when you open them up, then you would suspect a large colon issue, such as a displacement or a twist. That may not be the only problem. And just because, even if the cecum is just there, that doesn't necessarily also mean that there isn't a twist. But luckily we have, these amazing talented surgeons who've been doing it a long time and know what to look for and are quick that, the surgeries here are quick compared to anywhere else in the world. We're really lucky in that respect.
Yeah, again, that you said, it's the best of the best right here in Lexington, for sure.
Right.
Okay, so we've made it through a successful surgery, whether it was a twist or a blockage, and now we're at the point where we're recuperating. I know maybe there is no standard, but what would be a standard recommendation? Here's how you will recuperate this horse. What are the instructions that go back with the horse to the farm?
So that typically depends on gut function and what type of surgery they've had. Typically, in an ideal world, we would keep the horse in the clinic until, for one thing, the gut function has returned to normal as far as we can tell. And secondly, we'd like the horse to be up to free choice feeding, free choice hay to some degree, ideally free choice hay, fully free choice hay before they go home. That way we can be reasonably confident that they're not going to recolic in the near future. Sometimes we'll send them home when they're not quite up to eating free choice, and at home or at the farm, they'll gradually continue to increase the feeding. But at that stage, we don't know for sure that they may not colic at some point in the refeeding regimen. If the horse is eating free choice, it's going to be just monitoring them closely for manure output, monitoring their incision. And these horses, obviously, they have an incision into their abdomen, and it's really important that they don't trot or exercise or pace too much, and they stay reasonably quiet to allow that incision to heal to prevent any hernias from forming.
So nutritionally, for a colic case, we're not so much worried about a type of forage. You're not worried about whether it's an alfalfa, a mix, a clover. We want something soft and easy to there until we're sure of all the gut function.
So it kind of, again, depends on the type of surgery that they've had. Small intestinal issues, you want to feed low bulk feed. Products like Fiber Energy that I'm sure we'll come on to, they're great. They're low non-structural carbohydrate, but they're also low, they have a lot of fiber in them, but they're also low bulk. So that type of thing is great. Ideally, we'd avoid grain for a couple of weeks when they return to the farm. We don't want to sugar overload them, but at the same time, they need a decent amount of calories to heal. And it's been shown that if you don't feed enough calories, you're more likely to have incisional infections. Their immune function is going to be compromised. And so there's a fine line between overfeeding and not feeding enough. But there's also a little bit of an art to what you feed. You don't want to fill them full of sugar. There's other ways of getting the calories into them.
Absolutely. Okay. So now, a horse that has had a colic, how much care in the future? We've recovered, everything was successful, wonderful. How much care, how much attention do we have to pay in the future to that individual? Is it more likely to have a reoccurrence down the road? Treat them just like the rest of the herd? What's the recommendations there?
In general, you can treat them like a horse and like the rest of the herd. It does depend on what type of surgery they've had. There are some surgeries such as an entire colon resection, which we do very, very rarely. Maybe we've done one in the last 5 years here. But that would require an entire change in diet. But for your standard surgeries like a twisted colon or a small intestine, once you've got them back up to regular feed, their incisions healed, they're getting turned out again, then you can generally treat them like a normal horse. That's not to say that they're not potentially more likely to colic again. The brood mares specifically, they are more prone to twisting their colons repeatedly. And so there's obviously a risk of that. And then all horses that have had colic surgery, there's a slight risk of adhesions just from the inflammation in the abdomen associated with surgery and associated with having compromised intestine. And so adhesions can cause further colic down the line as well.
Okay. What about time of year? All the green grass is coming on in the spring. It's full of moisture. They're not eating as much dry hay. And here in central Kentucky, that can be a pretty abrupt switch, or getting into the dog days of summer around here and all the moisture is gone from the grass. Are those times that you worry, or are those not as significant as maybe other events?
Certainly that can contribute. The large amount of gas that the colon, the bacteria in the colon will produce while they're digesting fresh, green, lush grass can predispose them to gassing up, twisting, any of those things. Spring obviously is also the time when we have foalings, and so those post-foaling mares are going to be predisposed to twisting their colon anyway, because they've had a big 150-pound foal in there that's suddenly gone, and there's all that space for the colon to float around in. So I think the combination of things certainly can be risky, or increase risk anyway. And then changing weather in general, if it goes, and Kentucky likes to do that, right? It goes from freezing cold to pouring rain to hottest place in the world within a 2-day period. And that, we'll see more colic in association with that as well.
Absolutely. So I've said it many discussing horses and nutrition with people. I say horses are like teenagers. They need consistency.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, good. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Dr. B?
I don't think so. I think that's everything. Like I said, the most important thing is providing enough nutrition, but not too much, that, you increase the risk of complications in these horses post-operatively. So, all of us are available if anyone has any questions about that. I think that's it.
Do you prefer a vet call into the vet sooner or later?
Sooner, probably.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for your time today. I very much appreciate you getting off the road for just a moment and being with us. Thank you to Haggard Equine Medical Institute for having the conversation. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, you can reach out to the team at Haggard's wonderful website. And actually, they have contact information for the vets and most of the staff on there, I believe, easily available. So thank you again. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.